A silent question hangs over the investigation, one that many observers can no longer ignore. How do critical pieces of a high-profile case seem to slip through the cracks? If you're just joining in, remember to subscribe so you don't miss any updates as this story develops.
My friend drove Tyler and his parents to my office, where he was greeted by plainclothes detectives.
The unfolding inquiry into the death of a well-known public figure, someone widely viewed as a promising voice in national conversations, has reached a stage where clarity feels increasingly difficult to obtain. While investigators continue to insist the case is progressing as expected, those watching from the outside have begun noticing patterns that simply do not align with what they believe a transparent investigation should look like. This tension between official reassurances and public perception has created a climate of discomfort, where people feel drawn toward the unanswered questions more than the answers they've been given so far. One of the earliest and strongest reactions came from those close to the situation who felt uneasy about the direction of the investigation. Their concerns are not based on claims of wrongdoing or accusations against any authority. Instead, they revolve around something far more human, the expectation that a case of this magnitude should be handled with unmistakable clarity. When people sense gaps, no matter how small, those gaps naturally become larger in their minds. That is exactly what has happened here. For many, this sense of unease began with a handful of developments that appeared ordinary on the surface but felt unusual when viewed together. It wasn't one dramatic moment that caused alarm. It was the slow accumulation of subtle inconsistencies, documents that appeared incomplete, unanswered questions in press briefings, and small but noticeable delays in procedural steps that observers assumed would be straightforward. None of these issues alone would be enough to raise alarm, but combined they created a perception that something wasn't fitting neatly into place. At the center of these concerns is the powerful image of the man whose life was lost. He was frequently described as someone with notable ambition and an unusual combination of charisma and determination. He had built a presence that extended beyond political boundaries, influencing conversations, drawing large audiences, and capturing national attention. Those who admired him believed he was on a trajectory that could one day shape national leadership. In that context, his sudden death was not simply tragic, it felt momentous. This emotional weight created expectations that the investigation would be handled with extraordinary precision, sensitivity, and transparency. These expectations, however, collided with the imperfections of real-world institutions. While law enforcement agencies often work tirelessly and professionally, they also operate within limitations, technology failures, human error, procedural restrictions, and communication barriers can all play a role in shaping how information is shared. When people look back on historical investigations, they often view them through the lens of hindsight, imagining they should have been flawless. But history consistently shows that even major investigations can struggle with disorganization, miscommunication, or conflicting directives. It is this historical awareness that fuels some of the present worry. Comparisons have emerged between this case and older investigations from decades ago where the public later learned that mistakes were made, documents were misplaced, or critical information wasn't shared in a timely manner. Although these comparisons do not imply wrongdoing in the current situation, they highlight a long-standing challenge. Once trust weakens, even small uncertainties can take on greater meaning. Against this historical backdrop, some observers have vowed to focus entirely on confirmed, publicly available information. Their goal is to approach the case with patience, thoughtful analysis, and a commitment to avoiding speculation. This approach emphasizes the value of relying only on verified facts, recognizing that rushing to conclusions can cloud judgment and unintentionally undermine the search for truth. Their approach also reflects an understanding that investigations evolve, evidence emerges gradually, and not every question can or should be answered instantly. Among the concerns being discussed is a potential decision by the presiding judge to restrict the presence of cameras in the courtroom once the trial begins. While such restrictions are not uncommon, many judges choose to limit filming to maintain order, protect participants, or prevent media disruption. This possibility has made some members of the public uneasy. They fear that excluding cameras could reduce the visibility of a case already attracting widespread attention. Their worry is not rooted in the assumption that anything improper will happen, rather, it stems from the belief that full public visibility is the best tool for maintaining collective trust. When decisions take place outside public view, even for legitimate reasons, people can struggle to feel confident in the process. Similarly, discussions have formed around protective measures granted to the defendant. Under standard procedure, courts sometimes limit the release of images or recordings to avoid compromising the fairness of the trial or endangering an individual's safety. Yet the public perception of such protections has been complicated. Because this case has gained national attention, some individuals believe that shielding certain images, especially those capturing early interactions with law enforcement, restricts the public's understanding of essential moments in the timeline. Perhaps the most debated issue is the missing surveillance footage connected to the defendant's arrival at a sheriff's office shortly after the incident. For many people unfamiliar with how data retention systems function, the idea that footage could be unavailable feels surprising or even confusing. But experts note that many law enforcement agencies operate under strict retention timelines, where recordings are automatically cleared after a set number of days unless manually preserved. Automated deletion systems are used nationwide because storing thousands of hours of footage indefinitely is expensive and impractical. In this case, officials stated that the footage was not retained beyond the standard 30-day window. They explained that the recording had not been flagged for long-term preservation before the deletion cycle occurred. Although this explanation is consistent with common law enforcement practices, it left members of the public wanting reassurance that protocols had been followed properly and that no oversight occurred. The lack of additional detail from authorities, often due to legal constraints, has deepened anxieties instead of easing them. To understand why this missing footage matters so much to the public, one must consider how influential video evidence has become in modern investigations. Footage helps verify timelines, confirm identities, and clarify events that would otherwise rely solely on eyewitness testimony. Legal analysts explain that recordings, even of mundane moments such as someone entering a building, play an important role in establishing a clear chain of events. When such footage is unavailable, analysts must rely on other forms of verification, which can be accurate but may feel less definitive to observers. Experienced attorneys and investigators stress that the absence of this footage does not automatically signal a flaw in the investigation. Instead, they argue that the concern lies in communication. When a case is emotionally charged and widely followed, official updates must be especially clear, thorough, and frequent. Otherwise, even routine procedures can be misinterpreted as irregularities. The public's reaction in this instance appears to stem more from a desire for reassurance than from suspicion of wrongdoing. Nevertheless, the missing footage has become a symbolic representation of the broader concern that transparency, consistency, and communication must be prioritized at every stage. Community members who follow the case are not accusing authorities of misconduct, rather, they are urging leaders to recognize how high-profile investigations require a stronger-than-usual commitment to public visibility. In their view, releasing as much evidence as possible, within legal and ethical limits, is essential to restoring confidence, especially at a time when trust in institutions is fragile nationwide. This search for reassurance has also influenced the way people view the case's future. Many are calling for the trial to be as open as legally permissible, encouraging the release of testimony transcripts, court filings, and verified evidence exhibits. They argue that public access to information helps prevent misinformation, reduces unfounded speculation, and ensures that the legal process functions in a way that aligns with community expectations. Throughout all of this, one message continues to echo across commentaries, discussions, and statements from those familiar with the case: the desire for truth. Truth not only about what happened on the day of the incident, but also about how institutions respond, communicate, and uphold the principles of fairness and openness. It is this desire, not blame, not accusations, that drives calls for more clarity. The investigation, now moving steadily into its next stages, is approaching a point where every decision, every statement, and every procedural action will be placed under an increasingly intense spotlight. As more people begin to follow the developments, the level of public engagement is expected to rise sharply. This means investigators, legal teams, and court officials will not only be working to uncover the facts but will also be navigating the pressure that comes with widespread public attention. And while this heightened scrutiny can be challenging, sometimes even overwhelming, it is also a sign of something important: people care deeply about the integrity of the process. Any investigation involving a prominent or widely recognized individual naturally attracts significant emotional weight. People attach their personal expectations, beliefs, and concerns to the case because it feels bigger than one event. It feels symbolic. It represents questions about fairness, responsibility, and how institutions handle matters that are both sensitive and consequential. This emotional connection is why the public often demands more detailed explanations, clearer communication, and stronger assurances that all steps are being taken with honesty and care. As the investigation progresses, the environment surrounding it will likely become more dynamic and more demanding. There will be more requests for documents, more questions about timelines, more pressure for disclosure, and more voices appearing across social platforms and discussion circles. Every statement made by officials will be analyzed. Every delay or change in the timeline will be interpreted. Every new piece of information will spark discussion, debate, and, at times, speculation. This can create a difficult balance for investigators. On one hand, they are obligated to protect the integrity of the process, avoiding premature releases of sensitive information and ensuring that the investigation remains anchored in facts rather than public pressure. On the other hand, they must acknowledge the legitimate concerns of a public seeking clarity and reassurance. Managing this balance requires professionalism, caution, patience, and above all, transparency. Transparency, in cases like this, becomes more than a best practice, it becomes the backbone of public confidence. When institutions choose to share information openly, it signals that they have nothing to hide. When they explain why certain procedures are in place, why certain steps are taken, and what each update means, it shows that they respect the public's right to understand what is happening. People are not demanding instant answers. They are not insisting on conclusions before the investigation has run its full course. What they want is openness, a willingness to acknowledge uncertainties, to correct mistakes, and to share the process rather than hiding behind closed doors. When information is withheld without explanation, the public's imagination fills the gaps, often with suspicion. But when institutions are candid, even about challenges or delays, the public responds with patience and understanding. This expectation for transparency has been shaped by years of witnessing how secrecy, whether intentional or accidental, can quickly erode trust. Moments when information was delayed, distorted, or not shared at all have left lasting impressions. People have learned to look closely, to question, and to demand accountability. As a result, when a case involves a high-profile figure, the standard of transparency the public expects becomes even higher. The emotional stakes contribute to this expectation. A well-known figure carries influence, visibility, and public familiarity. When something serious happens involving such an individual, it resonates far beyond the immediate case. People who admired the person feel a sense of personal connection. People who followed their work feel invested. People who disagreed with them still expect fairness and due process. And people who simply witnessed the impact of their public presence expect clarity because the story affects the broader social landscape. This is why the demand for openness is not just a reaction, it is an expression of collective responsibility. Society depends on institutions to act with integrity, and institutions depend on the public to allow them the time and space to do their work. Transparency becomes the bridge that keeps both sides aligned. In essence, the strongest message emerging from this situation can be summarized in a single idea: transparency is not optional. It is not a luxury or a courtesy. It is essential. It is foundational to maintaining trust, understanding, and cooperation. When evidence is presented clearly and without unnecessary delay, it allows the public to see the reasoning behind decisions. When updates are communicated consistently, it prevents rumors from filling the void. When institutions explain their procedures rather than hiding behind technicalities, it builds credibility. The public does not need every detail at once, nor does it demand perfection. What people want is reassurance that those handling the investigation are doing so with honesty, diligence, and sincerity. They want to know that steps are taken deliberately, not carelessly. That decisions are based on facts, not assumptions. That officials are working with precision and respect for the gravity of the situation. This is particularly important in an era where information moves at extraordinary speed. A single unclear statement can spread rapidly across social platforms, sparking confusion. A delay without explanation can lead to speculation. A contradiction can fuel controversy. In this environment, transparency is not just beneficial, it is protective. It shields the investigation from unnecessary distrust and shields the public from misinformation. As more details eventually emerge, the hope is that each new development will be presented with clarity. That the language used will be straightforward rather than overly bureaucratic. That explanations will be given in a way that respects the public's intelligence and acknowledges their concerns. That officials will not only communicate but also listen. Clarity is not just about the facts, it is about tone, context, and timing. Careful communication shows respect. It demonstrates an understanding that people are paying attention, that they deserve to be informed, and that their engagement matters. The principles guiding the process, fairness, accuracy, and professionalism, must remain at the center. These principles are what make justice credible. They are what transform procedures from routine steps into meaningful actions that earn trust. For many people following the case, the goal is not to influence the investigation or predetermine its outcome. Their goal is to ensure that the truth is honored, that the individual at the center of the case is treated with dignity, and that the institutions responsible for uncovering the facts do so thoroughly and transparently. They want to see that the process is not only carried out properly but is visibly carried out properly. This idea, that justice must not only be done but also be seen to be done, has echoed throughout history. It reminds us that justice is not a private matter conducted behind closed doors. It is a public promise. It is an agreement between institutions and society. It is a commitment that extends beyond the outcome of a single case. As the story continues to unfold, the importance of communication cannot be overstated. Each step taken by investigators will shape public perception. Each explanation offered will help build or weaken trust. Each update, whether small or significant, contributes to the larger understanding of how the process is progressing. This is why ongoing communication matters. It prevents misunderstandings. It helps educate the public about what certain procedures mean. It provides reassurance that the case is moving forward with care and seriousness. At its heart, this moment is not just about an investigation. It is about the relationship between institutions and the people they serve. It is about respecting the public's right to understand how decisions are made. It is about showing that accountability is not just a concept but a practice. As long as communication remains clear and consistent, the public will continue to respond with patience and trust. And as long as transparency remains a guiding principle, the investigation will maintain its credibility. The story is still evolving. More updates will come. More details will surface. More questions will arise, and more explanations will be needed. But with a commitment to openness, each stage of the process can move forward with confidence. For those who continue watching closely, their interest reflects something meaningful, a belief in justice, a belief in truth, and a belief that institutions must rise to the moment when the public is paying attention. That belief deserves to be honored. To stay informed as new developments emerge and as this investigation continues to move forward, make sure you subscribe for future reports.